Hey, good evening, everybody. This is William Sumner. I'm very excited to be here. Um, this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, leadership. One, it's where I've spent virtually my entire life. Two, what businesses need, families need, the planet needs. We desperately need great leadership. And I'm very excited that you're taking the time to come tonight, be here, take your hard-earned evening time. I'm very, very excited to have you, and I'm going to deliver you some great content tonight. So I hope you're very excited. I want this to be fun for you, and I'm going to give you an admonition and something to think about. I'm going to ask you a number of times here. I'm going to tell you there is work here. There are questions I'm going to ask you. Please do the work. Take the time. Don't just absorb the content and don't think about this. Make questions. Put a calendar block right now on your calendar. Maybe next Tuesday afternoon. Maybe tomorrow morning. And you're going to schedule an event where you're going to process your notes and process the content that we're going to have. Get really, really excited about this. And because this is a three-part series, you're going to get some homework questions. Do the homework. I will look at everything that's sent in. It will help refine the content in webinar number 2 and webinar number 3 for you guys. So I'm very excited for you to be here. Make this work for you. Ask a lot of great questions. Maximize me. If you have to call me tomorrow or if you need to write me next Wednesday and say, hey, Bill, something came up that we discussed on the webinar. What does this look like? Please, I am a resource for you. You are here. You are in my wheelhouse. I'm very, very passionate about this and excited. So having said that, let's get going and actually get to work here. The first question I want to ask you is, how are you wired as a leader? How are you wired as a leader? And when people think about what does that even mean? What does it mean as how's I'm wired? Well, what happens for most of us is that we think, hey, we get a job, we start out with some technical competence, we gain competence, we're getting better, we're smarter than other people, our work results are good for that job, and as technical competence grows, there's this day that all of a sudden you get promoted. Yay! But now you have other technicians and other technical craft, sometimes people that you're still smarter than. Maybe you've been on the job longer and you know, okay, this is the procedures in this company. And even some companies, if you've never had training, they're going to go, oh, okay, well, we're going to get you some training. We're even going to get you some on-the-job training. We're going to send you out some formal schooling. We begin to refine our skills. Some of you have even signed up tonight as a result of companies saying, hey, we want to get you some leadership training. So in this environment of how people arrive, what they do is they tend to fall back on being smart. I'm smart. I know what to do. I know I have answers. And that becomes their leadership model. And so the question was, well, how are you wired as a leader? What's wired is you do a good job, you move along, and we have this little arena of, yeah, but what about the natural born leaders out there? You know, because some people will tell you, well, isn't leadership really innate? Isn't the best leaders among us? Aren't they really born to be leaders? And here's their evidence as to why we are born to be leaders. You look at someone's life and you say, you know, back when they were a little kid on the playground, they were always, you know, the one leading the exercises, changing the game. Or maybe as kids, they were always the first one chosen in sports or club activities. Or now as they go into school, they were the ones the teachers always picked on. And so you have the wherewithal, you're identified as being a leader. And then you go into something like Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. And in there, there's a great study that he talks about professional hockey players. And the reason why this is an unusual book and why it is so really kind of awesome in how it looks at success is the biggest correlated criteria that he could find was their birth dates. And because in Canada, hockey players, when you're January 1, you're in that year group. So if you're born on January 1st and you're playing against a kid in that year group born on December 31st, you're a year older than him. Now, it doesn't matter when you're 33 and he's 32, but when you're 5 and he's 4, you're 20% bigger and faster. When you're 8 and he's 7, and so 80% of professional hockey players have their birthday falls in the first quarter. What happens is this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that this person is a leader a lot of the times, not every time, but we're beginning to look at this notion that are leaders really born? And the answer is some are, but a lot are not. There are other factors at play. And what you're going to work on and learn tonight and in this three-part series, we can teach you every skill. You have every skill. You have to unlearn some things you learned in grade school. We're going to reinstall, in my world, what I call neural software that says this is what it means to be a leader. But we are all born to be leaders. It's innate in all of us. Now, some are a little sharper than others, but the vast majority of people have far more leadership skills, and so we're going to look really hard at this wiring. Now, what I want you to do now, we're going to actually do a little tiny exercise. I'm going to pull up what's called an identity exercise. And what I want you to do is get your pen and paper out, and I want you to write down 5 adjectives, 2 nouns, and 2 verbs that best describe you as a leader. 5 adjectives, 2 nouns, and 2 verbs that best describe. And I want you to use your words, not you're sitting in the privacy of your computer here. Don't BS yourself. I'm not going to put any of this on display. You can ask me questions about it, but you're not going to be forced to go anywhere with this. So use your words. Use your normal self-talk when you drive into work, when you think about how am I going to solve this problem or how am I going to get promoted? Well, they should promote me because I'm methodical or I'm dependable, or you just know these words. You've lived your life in this body, in this journey, in this life. You know how this works. So an example of this might be, I am a kind, caring, dependable, smart, methodical. Those are your 5 adjectives you might pick. And the nouns, I'm really a good diplomat and a negotiator. That's why I'm a good leader, because I'm sensitive as a diplomat to everybody's point of view, and I negotiate and I compromise. Maybe those are the nouns that you pick for yourself. And you create a great environment, and you encourage personal empowerment. So this becomes a great working word for you. A great working sentence for you. I am a kind, caring, dependable, smart, methodical diplomat and negotiator that creates a safe environment and encourages personal empowerment. Now, I'm not going to put any writing music on. I'm just going to give you about a minute and think about, write down your sentence on your 5 adjectives, your 2 nouns, your 2 verbs. Go. Okay, I'm coming back to you guys. I wanted to capture your words, your normal self-talk, but here's what you're going to get in the attachment. And we're not going to spend a lot of time here. And in fact, as you look at on your PC screen, it might be difficult to see. It might be capable to be seen. Either way, when you get the handout, you can see it really clearly. And what you're going to notice is I've got almost 2 sheets, and this is an appendix out of my audio coaching system, that's almost 2 full pages of hundreds of adjectives that you might pick. So in the full-blown exercise, I would be prompting you these words. And the bolded words, just so you know, don't mean anything. It was a visual to help you read a lot of standalone words. But I'm going to pick some of the bolded and non-bolded because maybe you picked dazzling, or maybe you picked self-assured, or maybe you picked innovative, or maybe you would pick fueled, or strong-minded, or creative. There are lots of great adjectives that really describe your leadership style. Now, as you go down through those 2 pages, here's more: exceptional, tranquil, well-suited, reliable, stable, resonant, enabler, encourager, impregnable. These are all great adjectives. And now let's go look at the nouns. Because sometimes people are like, okay, diplomat and negotiator, but, who am I? Well, this is a full page. Leader, colleague, inventor, architect, coach, and there's even descriptors, tower of strength. Some of these, because these actually came from live client work, and a lot of times clients are more brilliant than I, that you would be a gardener of souls. I've always enjoyed a Renaissance man or woman, a peacemaker, a warrior leader, a comrade, a practitioner, a visionary. Those are the nouns that describe you. And then we go to a bunch of different verbs to stretch or grow or connect or inspire or to help people spread their wings or produce, live authentically, heal, stroke, encourage, cultivate, stimulate. There are so many great combinations. And then the last page I think you'll find really, really fun. I actually give you these identity statements. So it follows this format. I, Bill Sumner, I state your name, see, hear, feel, know, with great certainty that I am. And now you begin to see what real live clients in past exercises have done. Extraordinary, unique, enlightened, catalyst, destined to encourage, or I'm a smart, business-oriented, successful. Now, these are not all necessarily focused on leadership, but it's giving you the sense of what your identity command is of you as a leader, because the thing that we're going to want to do in the course of this process and homework is we're going to redesign it. We're going to change this sentence. We're going to keep some of the words. It's not that what you're doing today is dumb or bad. It's just maybe not as powerful and as exciting and as outrageous as it possibly could be if you got really excited and thought about it. And then I actually have, if for your enjoyment, both in the audio coaching system, but I don't hide a lot of my work. Heck, a lot of times when you're dealing with difficult clients, I was the first difficult client to begin with. So my 5 are grateful, connected, guided, quantum, loving, warrior, healer. Those are my 2 nouns. I have 4 verbs. I'm here to serve and to heal and grow and inspire everyone that wants to be inspired. I'm here to inspire anyone and everyone to soar and to grow and to tap into potentiality. And when you now begin to do that as your identity statement, even if as we look at these 5, 2 and 2 that you did, and this new one does the content processing tonight versus the old one, you're going to have a different experience, because I'm going to appeal to the new leader tonight already as we're going to continue to create and understand this content.
Bill had a question.
Yes.
Yes. Is this what we want to be or are?
Well, Bill, it's a great question. Is who we want or what we are. Now, in the exercise, I ask you for want. Or excuse me, scratch that because I wrote it backwards. I ask you for, give me the 5. I said your normal self-talk. But what you're going to discover in this technology, what you want now can be installed to what you are. Because you do not need to have evidence and validation. We teach a tool, not tonight, and if you've not heard this tool and it's intriguing to you, it's called Rockstar Album Sales. All of my tools have fun, realistic, useful, easy to remember names. In essence, the punchline is most people believe in order to be a rock star, you need album sales. But album sales never creates a rock star, because if you're not a rock star when your gold album comes in, you panic because you realize now people are going to expect more hits from me. And that's what a one-hit wonder defines. You have to believe you're a rock star, and you believe you're a rock star because you have passion for your song and you're here to sing. So the rock star that practices their instrument is different than the person who's really, really good wanting to be a rock star. So to put this model into leadership, who am I as a leader for most people is based on the album sales that they've got in their history. Jobs they've done well in, jobs they've done poorly in, mistakes they've made, builds limitations in their minds. And so that's how they define who they are as a leader. But to say this is the leader that I want to be, bold, outrageous, extraordinary, how do I get there? Well, you've already got your first clue on how to get there. You have to set that as a target to begin with. So there's a whole design process, Bill, that's going to come into focus over these 3 webinars. Great question. If that didn't answer it, type back to Brian. Anybody else have any questions? I love it when you stop and ask me to explain or challenge anything that I'm telling you. Because I'm going to tell you some things tonight and in the next 2 parts that's going to not necessarily always jive with what you think. You would have thought that hockey players are professionals because they're the best athletes. And what Malcolm Gladwell, and he sold millions of books on it, and he's a lot of studies. It's Juilliard music students. It's the Beatles. There was 15 business cases on what makes really successful people. It's generally rarely what you think. And again, on a common sense level, you kind of know that. Because sometimes really successful people sometimes succeed, sometimes don't. Sometimes underdogs who are not the most talented person in the arena end up winning, and sometimes they don't. And we go, oh, well, this is a mystery here, or we root for underdogs. It's not a mystery, it's science. I'm teaching you in this 3-part series, beginning foundation stones to the science of leadership. And one of the most important things is that you have the right target to aim for. Because if you're trying to improve the old you, whatever that average, above average man or woman is, and trying to get some incremental improvement, where in fact we can kind of jump right to that. That's down a little bit, but I know that that's coming. It is what happens when you make this new, extraordinary, outrageous, magical, epic, legendary, when that becomes your target. Well, what happens? What does that mean? Well, most of you have heard the expression, it's better to aim for the stars and miss than aim for the gutter and hit. And everybody, oh, bravo, bravo, I get that. I'm going to aim for the stars. Yeah, but you don't aim for the stars, because the real aim you have is on 5 ordinary, again, and I'm not demeaning any of your sentences out there. You've already, in great part, based on album sales in your past, has limited what those words could be. All 4-year-olds, by the way, before this limitation process happens, their words are Superman, Superwoman, end of story. They don't even understand that they're about to go through an education process that says, sit down, shut up, look like other kids, color within the lines. And if you do that well, we give you an A. And if you do that consistently well, we'll call you a leader. Because that's in essence the kind of the sarcastic view of it. But that's how the models get built. Become a technical craftsperson better than other people, you get promoted. But there's so much more to this. And so we're going to come back and I'll give you a little hint. Look at that sentence right there. You've all heard the expression in your business models, oh, it's far better to underpromise than overdeliver. It's far better to underpromise and overdeliver. I'm going to come back to that model and ask you again from this newer psychology. But let's keep working on where we are. So I want to come back to what I said. What is wiring as a leader? What does it mean to be wired? Are you wired as a leader? Well, the first problem that most leaders, not all, most have is, do you own everything in the process? And most people are busy saying, oh, well, there's variables that are not in my control. I don't own variables. The weather could be bad. In the military, when I went in, the West Point DNIE that I have is, oh no, you own the variables, you even own the weather, because you're responsible to get a mission done and bring everybody home, and the stakes are very, very high in that setting. That's why extraordinary leaders are created there, because the stakes are high. People step up to extraordinary stakes. They step up to make extraordinary things happen in extraordinarily difficult environments. But it happens that the foundation stone is that real leadership owns everything. And so the challenging metaphor, I told you I'm going to challenge a number of ways you believe things happen. I'm going to ask you that sentence, if you can see it underneath my writing there. In the metaphor of whose responsibility is it to learn? Is it the student's job to learn? And hey, the teacher did their job. They presented the material. They presented it well. It was presented in a great format. And the student just didn't learn. And now we look at the student. Why didn't he learn? Why didn't she learn? Well, they're lazy, or they're undisciplined, or they're rebellious, or they're not focused. Or we pick all these words. Well, if you're a West Point leader on a military mission, why didn't they come back? Whose fault is that? It's always the teacher's job to teach. Now, I understand that the students have an impact and you want to teach accountability to the students. I get that. But the underlying psychology for great leaders, and this challenges a lot of people's thought process, the underlying foundation is it's your responsibility to ensure that student learns. If they're lazy, undisciplined, unfocused, stupid, we don't call kids stupid, but okay, they're slow, they're not good at math. No. Great teachers can take people who hate math and teach them math, because that's what great teachers do. But again, it's got to be the target. You have to begin to own everything. And so potentially one of your homework questions could be is, in my job today, what do I own and what do I consider out of my sphere and I can't own it? Customer pricing, market conditions, how things show up. What in my teenager's behavior do I not own? And this is a critical foundation stone. If you're a leader, you own it all. And so now, when what was previously out of your sphere and you move it there, it doesn't mean that the weather's always perfect for you. And it also means, hey, sometimes the mission doesn't get done, or sometimes the mission gets done and I don't bring everybody back. But every leader worth his or her salt begins the mission planning process with, it's my responsibility to do this, every piece of it, and I don't care what the obstacles are. It's my job to overcome them, even when they're not out of my control. This is a big, big point. I want you to ponder this. Now, it really gets tricky in this little tool, in the 10. Now, what that tool means in the 10 is 90% of life generally is mundane, it's average, you're going from, point to point to point, doing email, cleaning your inbox, returning some phone calls, thinking about your grocery list, planning the weekend, doing the things you have to do. Most of life is in your control. But there's this 10% of life. It's crazy. It's insane. It's intense. It's stressful. It is out of control. Now, most people will say, I don't like that, but here's why you want that. The reason why this is mandatory for all humans, all businesses, it's the only place you get growth. It's the only place that you really get the solace satisfaction that, hey, I got this job done. I met this quota this month, and it was a tough month. Pricing changed. Our customers, were telling me my biggest competitor came out with a new product offering, and I still hit my number. Oh, in the 10, where you might begin to say, well, as long as it's not a hurricane, as long as the storm isn't too bad, okay, I'll think about owning the weather. No, number 2, you've got to own the weather in the 10. When the storms are the highest, that's when people are really desperately looking for leaders to rise up. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to win every time. But when you stand up in that locker room and say, all right, boys, all right, people, it's on me. I'm going to lead you there. Follow me. We'll get there. We'll get there. I'll get you there. Maybe a little late, maybe not everything, maybe we'll have some bumps and bruises along the way, but follow me. We're going to get there. That's when people become inspired. That's when people want to be more than they are. They will deliver for a leader who inspires them. They will not deliver always at the same level, certainly, for a manager who's tracking them with a spreadsheet, or a project report, or red lights and yellow lights and green lights in a quality process. They will follow to the ends of the earth and come back for someone that inspires them. But you cannot begin to inspire them until you own everything and you're pushing in the 10. Now, are you bold in how you push and inspire? If you're pushing for average or above average, remember, we're in the 10. The storm is raging. That's where growth is. That's when we really have to push into this margin of excellence. That's when we have to lean so far over the edge that it's almost insanity. That's when leadership is working at its greatest level. So, again, when you look at how you arrived at the leader that you are today, and anybody that's on this call to even be here, I know every one of you are above average on a bad day. And some of you are already really, really excellent, awesome leaders. But to take it to that next layer, to take it to the golden medal that you never got before, to take it to the penultimate championship stage for you and your team and the people that you lead, you have to practice and fall and fail and get up and push on bold, outrageous, inspirational. You cannot, so I told you I'd come back to the shoot for the stars. You really have to shoot for the stars. It's a trite expression, and then most people really shoot for above average. So we're going to look at some of the other things that are really important. Shooting for above average really becomes a question of what are your personal standards for excellence and the crucial nature that standards play.
You had a question from Bill on the
Okay?
What about when you don't feel a big enough reason or purpose to push?
Then you got to ask yourself why you're doing it in the first place. If you don't feel inspired yourself, then you can't inspire anybody else. And that's what leaders do. So even if you're Nelson Mandela and you're in prison for 27 years, the inspiration is not I'm in prison. The inspiration is when I get out. So there's always a place to figure out where it is my inspiration coming from. If it's drudgery and it's a means to an end, you know, there's a very famous Buddha expression that I've kind of bastardized a little bit that basically says, you know, before I was enlightened, I mowed the lawn. After I was enlightened, I mowed the lawn. Because you always have to mow the lawn. There are things that we have to do as leaders that's what we have to do. But to be inspired, if you don't feel it, that's in a whole nother body of content. Because we got to tap into, am I doing something that's just boring and not inspiring? What is it that's going on? You must get inspired. Again, Bill, a great question. Thank you for that. Now, one little tiny comment. Bob, I'm getting some feedbacks. There's a mic unmuted out there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm trying to fix that right now.
Okay? Now, what are your personal standards for excellence? B or masterpiece? Here's the metaphor. So let's say on a day in, day out, week in, week out, maybe you're a B, maybe even a B plus on the reports you turn in, on the PowerPoints that you build for your boss, for your team, the results that you have to deliver to your organization. Solid B plus. And the boss comes to you and says, hey, Bill, I need an A from you. The board's coming in this week. You know, maybe this is just a critical quarter. You know, can you give me an A effort on this report? And what happens in above average worlds, most people will do the A and give the A. The crucial question is, next week, what do you think that most people will give you? Do they go, well, hey, I'm an A, so I didn't know that, or blah, 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 I thought I'll keep the A's up. Yeah, no, that doesn't happen. Do they give the B? Do they go back to giving a B? And the answer is, no, that doesn't normally happen either. The next week, what happens is people will do a C because they want the boss to know, don't expect A's from me every week. My personal standard, you know it because I give it to you week in and then week out. It's a B plus. I'm above average. And most bosses love above average teammates, team members. And they'll be fine. They'll accept the A and they'll even tolerate the C because they know they asked you to give more for the A. But when your own personal standard of excellence is, I always shoot for an A or I always shoot for a masterpiece, again, it's not that you don't get to practice, ROI and diminishing laws of return. You're not going to put stupid resources in minimal efforts. This is a question on what are my standards? How do I do things? What do I hold myself to? And now, is it written down? Do I really? Because people know what the standard is, but generally it's not written down because, oh heck, then I have to perform to it. And if I write it down and it's a B, or it's average, or it's not my best, well, I'm not going to write that down. I don't want to be that person. If I write it down, I have to become, and you'll see underneath there, I have a tool called the I Have a Dream speech. And again, I'm not going to cover that tonight. It's in another content section. If you don't know the I Have a Dream tool, write me. I'll send you a little 12-minute video on it. But the I Have a Dream tool gives you goose pimples, just like Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is, and says, my business plan, my diet, my life, what I want, so bold and outrageous, I have a dream. And it gives me goose pimples. But this personal standard written down in the 10, now we're going to mix and add that. I've got to give this in the 10. leaning out over my edge. Oh my goodness. And now we come to what I dropped into earlier. If that was the target, then this notion of aim for the stars and hit and miss and bet, you know, blah, 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 it's not a very resourceful expression. It doesn't really empower you, because the real expression that real leaders make is aim for the stars and by God, we're going to hit them. And if we miss them, we're going to aim again. And we're going to keep aiming till by golly, we hit them. Because that's who we are. That's the leader I am. That's the team I run. Now, here's where I have many famous discussions, and you can't really see the air quotes, discussions on, is it a great business model to under promise and over deliver? Be surprised if you've never heard that one. 99% of people I talk to think this is a great sentence. It's not a great sentence for great leaders. It's a great sentence for managers, because managers are working on lowering expectations and then exceeding them. That's not aiming for the stars, is it? And if you're a leader and you're an inspired leader, then the sentence becomes, we are going to overpromise and we are going to over-deliver on those promises. And by golly, that's aiming for the stars. And when you miss, and sometimes you will, I get that. But how you eventually hit the stars is because every time you miss the stars, you in-flight and course correct. It's so bad. I had a brilliant executive in here not too long ago. Really, really successful executive. And we're arguing this. He really, really wanted to argue this. And here's what I asked him. I said, well, let's say you promised the board a 5% gain on the business model this year, and you actually delivered 6% because you under-promised and you over-delivered. The question is this better than, worse than, or really the same as if you promised the board 8% and you missed it and you delivered 7%? Because you realize if you are focused on 5%, you very rarely hit 7. You can get to 6 very, very hard when your aim is 5% to deliver 7. But when you promise 8, it's easier or easy to deliver 7%. And so the question I ask is, which one is better? Or is one worse? You know, he said, I get what you're saying, but the reality is, I'd rather be this person. I go, okay, who do you want on your team? He had to think about that, and he goes, well, I guess I'd have to say them too. Because if they were promising me 8 and delivering me 7, well, I get that 7% is bigger than 6, but there's too much stress and anxiety. I go, oh, you're talking about in the 10. Yeah, there is. But that's where greatness lies. So this is, again, these are different thoughts for most people, that I want to overpromise and overdeliver. That's bold. That's outrageous. That's courage. People struggle in their business model with doing that. So when we look at what are you demanding of yourself, what are you demanding of the team, and do you habitually reward people's behavior and punish people's behavior based on these truths, that these are the standards that you provide yourself, then you have to look really, really hard at what you're demanding, what you're driving, what your design is, who are you, and we can even go back to the beginning. What are your 5 adjectives? Are they bold and outrageous and extraordinary and pushing into an envelope that scares the crap out of you, but you just know you have to do this because you're you? Because most leaders, again, back to the beginning, because they got promoted by technical craft to be in charge of other technical tradecraft people, and they got better answers, that becomes a leader. That's a manager. That's not, and again, it's not that spreadsheets are bad. I'm not bad-mouthing methodical tools of leadership and management. What I'm telling you is, in order to inspire, in order to reach into someone's chest and grab their heart and make them want to follow you through the gates of hell and back because you're you, and they feel better about themselves when they're delivering 7% and missing the 8 than they do about safely committing to 5 and delivering 6. These are big, big moments. And so the first thing that most managers do is they focus far more on punishment than they do rewards. And then when they do rewards, they tend to do things that are not as impressive and as fun. We know in all the management studies, you don't motivate people by money. Yet we constantly are giving bonuses and pay raises and saying, now we want more out of you. That doesn't motivate people. And then when they don't, we punish them. As opposed to, if someone missed the stars, and this is a homework, this is a tough truth for you. Would you punish that person? Or would you reward that person? Would you punish the leader that gave you 8% commitment and only delivered you 7? And would you reward the leader that gave you 6% when they promised you 5? Think about this. These are metaphors, but there's real energy, real psychology in real life taking place. And most managers, you hear such things as, oh, well, these are your targets, but we're going to give you stretch. Again, I'm not bad-mouthing that some of you on this call might do this. I just want to ask you the question, why wouldn't you give them stretch? And then reward them for getting the difference between goal and stretch, as opposed to punishing them. Why would you set someone up for a goal that's attainable and a goal that's unattainable? Because that's really what you're doing. We're saying, okay, this you can attain, and this is really unattainable. Because if the stretches were attainable, you call them the goals. You wouldn't call them stretch. Because you have this stretch goal sitting out there, it's going to motivate them to do more. And it's counterintuitive. This is another point that's going to challenge the way a number of you think and run your businesses. I ask you to really dig into the psychology of, no, set the unattainable goal. When Kennedy said, we're going to land a man on the moon in 10 years, NASA almost had an accident in their pants. Because they said, oh my God, our plan is to do this in 40 years. We in order to do this, there's stuff not even invented yet. This is like, Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea kind of crap. If you really think we're going to land a man on the moon, he goes, no, 10 years. Well, if he had listened and said, well, look, 40's the goal, but let's make it a stretch of 30, they wouldn't have done it in 30 because they weren't inspired to be more than they are. That's what leaders do. Now, I'm going to finish a little bit of the content tonight. I got 2 more chunks. Just going to talk a little bit, not a lot, because I'm going to thread this through the next 2 webinars as well. If you don't know this, I spent a lot of my military career with elite Ranger units. Those men are the best of the best. They have the highest standards. They drive themselves to go bigger, farther, better. Not going to go into my normal joke about who's better, the SEALs, Delta, Green Beret, Special Forces. The point is, any elite psychology, be it in the military, be it the para jumpers, at the elite firefighters that go in on the hottest forest fire, the best of Fire Company 7 and the first responders. When you're on the elite side of psychology, I put this slideshow together a long time. This is a very relevant slide. Number one, they live, breathe, and believe in the man and woman on the left and on the right of them. This is a team. It's not a group of individuals. And you'll notice all of these beliefs are driven by the leader. So the leader has to sit down and go, how do I get people to live, breathe, and believe in who we are? Again, not likely to happen through being smart, and not likely to happen through my standard little joke spreadsheets, project management reports, red light, green light. Those will be present, and elite units use them. But how they believe in the team now begins to come into some of the tools that we're talking about. It begins with the standards that are set. We're going to do a big chunk on IQ, EQ tools in the next webinar, which will really begin to bring home these emotional, inspirational tools. 2, we've talked about this a bunch on this call tonight. The standards are extraordinarily high. Plans have plans within plans, contingencies within contingencies. Why? Because you're driven by the stars. And if you're going to shoot for the stars, you got to think about all the reasons why you can't get there. And you're going to have a contingency. Well, what if plan A doesn't? Well, then plan B. Well, what if plan B fails? Well, then it's plan C. Well, then what if plan C doesn't work? Well, why doesn't it work? Well, it's A or B. Well, then we're going to go D or E. You're constantly. And again, it is going to be tied back. I can't say this enough. It's going to be tied back to the standards that you have set. It's going to be defined by the stars. Every action, be it big or small, is executed at 100%. They don't walk, slow down, half-ass anything. Everything is done at a superb, extraordinary standard and scale, big or small. And again, these all flow together. And then your training is superb. You train to play that way. Now, the last chunk, and I'll give you another 10-second station identification here, checking in with the Inevitable You Leadership webinar. If you have any questions, I know some of this is provocative. If you have a question, think about it. You can write me tomorrow if you want. But if you start to ponder how these principles, how this content is going to impact your job, your family, your health, your community, the people you influence, it gets to be really, really crazy, scary, crazy fun, crazy heartfelt, crazy. Cray. Everything's fun. Now,
Brandy asked what platoon you were in.
What platoon? I was the chief instructor for Camp Darby, and then I was en route to 3rd Ranger Regiment in my last duty assignment. Thank you for that great question. But platoons are the second smallest building block. Every company has multiple platoons. Every battalion has multiple companies. But I won't bore you with a military structure for right now. But thank you for asking that.
She said Michelle had a friend that may have been on your team during Black Hawk Down era.
Well, I was down during Black Hawk Down, but I knew a lot of those guys. Probably a fourth of those went through my company and our training back in the early 80s in order for them to be there in the early 90s. I knew Teddy McKnight. But, yeah, we can talk about that when we see you, Brandy. Six-step model, that was the other thing. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this tonight. In fact, there's an entire day spent on this. But when you're thinking about these internal psychological structures, I just want you to know that there's some very deep tools that when we look at discovering the deepest truth and patterns and software that's creating these leader models, and when we step up and when we don't, and when we stumble, and what causes us to be afraid, and what limitations do we impose upon ourselves. There is a great series of questions that we can ask about. Is it a story? Are these a cause and effect? Is there other software running? Again, for a first-time person on this call, you won't know a lot of these. Some of you on this call, you've been with me a long time, you know virtually all of these terms. But as a leadership model, ultimately this notion that people are mysterious and people are intangible, and I don't know why people do what they do. And as a leader, that's why I can't guarantee performance and behaviors, is absolutely not true. People are very tangible. People are very easy to explain. And in the 10, when this is a crisis, it's even more easy to explain because they fall back to even more predictable behavior patterns. It's when they're, off doing the mundane is when they become actually a little bit more unpredictable, right? They don't become unpredictable when there's a crisis. They batten hatches. They get back into harbor. They get safe. They don't get unpredictable. But to know the truth and then to figure out, okay, now that I know the inflection point, I know the pivot point, that I've got to budge and move their psychology, there are tools that talk about how we seize leverage. We have to destroy the old pattern. Now, technically, you can't really destroy anything in the mind. Once it's in here, it can be 30 years ago. It's locked in a chemical electrical pattern in that little 3-pound hard drive, little fat water microamperage electric. But we want the pattern to be so broken and so, not real that I have to color within the lines. I have to do what the teacher says in order to get an A on this project. We need to blow that pattern up. That's not what great leaders do. They discover lines that don't exist. They hand people crayons and colors that have never been mixed and matched before. And they empower the people on their team to do that themselves. So to know how to not let that old pattern, the old questions, but what if I can't? But what if I don't? But what if this fails? Those are not the questions you want them to ask it. You want them to say, but what if it succeeds? And how can I do that? And if it doesn't succeed, but then I got to find a way for it to succeed because I own everything here. Blah, 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 blah. This is going to be covered more in the third webinar. But again, we spend an entire day on this model. You now install the new pattern, and part of the little tiny tool that we did tonight, for example, is building a new identity statement. And I'm not going to install that tonight. I'm going to do that first thing because your homework is I want you to send me your new powerful, send me what you wrote in old, and you'll get this in an email. Send what you wrote as old, and then I want to see what did you keep, what did you like, what did you change. And we'll take a look at that. I'll help that. And then I'll give you the tool for how to install that. Then you condition and test the pattern. Okay, you're awesome. You're totally set to shoot for the stars, right? Well, now your boss comes in and says, okay, there's layoffs coming. Well, now what do? What does it look and feel like? Because that's real. Sometimes your karma is that you can shoot for the stars and for the next 3 years, you're just a rocket ship. But there's going to come that storm. And if you have bad luck sometimes, you walk out of this webinar all excited to shoot for the stars tomorrow. And the first thing you hear when you go to work tomorrow is, oh, there's going to be layoffs. I need you to give me 20 people off your team. Well, it's kind of hard to shoot for the stars, Bill. I get that. Again, this is a psychology that we're building. So we condition and test the future to see where the software for you will break, and then we put a great celebration in. And that really is where leadership begins to rock. We are going to look at how we're wired. We're going to look at, is it natural or can I be more of a leader? Is this something I can really learn and take to really extraordinary levels? We're going to look at the specific building blocks you are built on, and we're going to wire new ones in, modify those. We looked at, well, the real problems for most leaders is they don't own it. They are focused on, well, these are the variables I control. And again, you can go to Harvard Business School. Some of the best leadership training, they're going to say, hey, you're going to control other things, but you only influence others. Yeah. George Patton, Douglas MacArthur, Dwight D. Eisenhower were not influencers. They owned everything that was in their kingdom and under their purview. Are you bold in what the stars are about? We don't want just little stars. We want bold and outrageous stars. And the standards of which we're going to do that. We went through a lot of great stuff here tonight. I highly encourage you, based on the pace that I move, tell Brian in a couple, 3 days, or you can type him now, say, hey, send me the link to the video when it comes out. Go back and listen to this again. Listen to it a couple of times. Actually write my sentences down and go, do I buy that sentence? Because the biggest problem you're going to have is if I buy that sentence, well, golly jeepers, then something, and this is my symbol for change, something's got to change. And that's scary to me. So then the way to invalidate that is go, I don't know if I buy this. But I'll tell you what, take the words out of it, put the energy and the intention, and there's not a 4-year-old that would disagree me. In fact, they'd be going like, dude, why are you wasting your time telling us the obvious? This is all obvious to us. Because the 4-year-old, there's no 4-year-old that says, you know what, given a lot of thought, I think a tricycle is really the best thing for me. It's safe, not as fast as a two-wheel, but you see my elbows? Man, I tried that two-wheeler. It was a disaster. And when you're an adult and you get a Chapter 7, you get a divorce, you get laid off, or something bad happens to you, you go, that's evidence I shouldn't be pushing for a two-wheeler. But it's not in your DNA to settle for anything less than the stars. The stars are in your DNA. So that's our hour. I'll leave it there. I'm going to give you one final, and I'll stay and do any Q&As as long as you have them. You can, again, write me afterwards, call me tomorrow, next week. We're up again in a couple of weeks. Brian, that date is?
August 6th.
Put August 6th. If you got any friends that you think need to see this is going to be taped. They can buy the same package you did and come and catch up because they'll watch what you watched and really get excited about your questions. Look at what our syntax, what our topics are. I've already kind of given you general direction, IQ, EQ, and some other things. Really get your questions ready. I want you to ask me your hardest questions that's troubling you about getting to be a big leader. Brian, any questions?
Yeah, Bill had a comment earlier. He said, I get excited and passionate and make promises, and I mean them, but then things happen, like get busy or get demotivated in general.
Yeah, but see, here's the nature of the beast. And again, Bill, it falls into the place that we're talking about. If you get excited and you get inspired and you follow what I'm telling for you, you get the stars is where you're headed. And then when an obstacle to the stars come up, in essence, what you said, well, I find that demotivating. Well, in order to be stars, isn't it a law? Isn't it mandatory that obstacles come? And so if you lose sight of the stars because all you have is this absolute, tunnel vision focus. Ooh, what's going on there? tunnel vision focus. Give me my pen back. You have this tunnel vision focus on the wall that's in front of you and you're missing the star on the other side. You've got to believe in your ability to get through the wall. So it's not the star strategy that we worry about in these kind of cases. It's what's my obstacle busting strategy. And now you've got to get excited about what amazing obstacle buster I am. And maybe that has to be, at least for this time frame, more important, because there's some people, they get through the obstacles because the obstacles are in the way for above average, and they're determined to be above average, so they'll do that. We always get what we set as a target. What you think about that? We always get what we set as a target. Or, if we fail, we get back up and we get back to it. And for people to say, well, wait a second, I set a target and I didn't get it. No, what happened is you changed the target. If you set a loving marriage as a target and you got divorced and then said, well, it's impossible for me to have a loving marriage, so I just want a marriage relationship with somebody who doesn't cheat on me, well, that's what you get. You change the target. You always get the target. You always get the target. So if you set, I'm an amazing obstacle buster, if that's what really is the problem here, and I won't go further than this in the answer that you've given me, the Q&A that you've given me. Demotivation, you've got a star in front of you, this amazing, extraordinary, happy, wonderful, more than this place that I'm in now, and an obstacle appeared and it demotivated me? No. Obstacles are en route to the stars. If there were no obstacles, quite frankly, they're not stars. They're gutters. They're easy to get to. Everybody has them. Anything that doesn't have an obstacle, we all got. Leaders inspire because they never lose focus on the stars. And Bill, if the real challenge here is, well, I need a better obstacle busting strategy, we can talk about that. We got those tools too. Great question, Bill. And one that a lot of people have, by the way.
You said not really obstacles as much as I'm wiped out after work. I'm talking about after work goals or passions.
So I want you to think about this. So if at work you have stars, well, then I'd expect you to be wiped out here. This would make sense, right? So if at home I have stars, do you? Well, then the strategy becomes, if it's exhaustion is now the obstacle, because remember, I just put obstacles. I didn't say what the obstacles were. I didn't say, because every obstacle has its own solution. For example, and this is part of the holistic work that the inevitable you teaches because it's real. I want you to go look at a software at Paziz.com. There is sleep research that most people are not aware of. This little device, which I bought 15, 20 years ago for $200, I now have on my Droid as a $10 download. And what it does is it accelerates REM sleep, which means you can take a 20-minute nap and it's the equivalent to a 1 or 2 hour sleep. You can Paziz for 1 hour and it's equivalent to 3 to 5 hours of sleep. So if you're truly exhausted, then go home and nap for 20 minutes and jump out of your Paziz mode just excited to beat the band because you've got stars at home that you're excited about. There is always solutions on the other side of the obstacles. You just have to be really creative, and that's why in a coached environment, bring up every obstacle you got. Send me 20 of them. I'll give you 20 strategies to get around them. I haven't met an obstacle I can't beat yet. Maybe not in this lifetime. I haven't figured out how to fly. I really want to fly. I want to sprout wings and fly. But somewhere in human history, whether it's 3,000 years from now or 30,000 years from now, or 3 years from now, with the GMO modifications, Monsanto, so we may be sprouting wings here too long eating this modified corn. We'll figure it out. There are no obstacles a leader cannot beat. Any other great questions, Brian?
Yeah, Michelle says, what about those that overpromise and then end up working nonstop and sacrificing self in order to overdeliver?
Well, it's a great question. Thank you for this, Michelle. You have to look at the rock star, the passion, the song that I'm singing. If I am self-sacrificing, does a rock star self-sacrifice their passion for their song? And the answer is, yeah, probably not, because their song is not a sacrifice. The only time you look at the energy of the word I'm sacrificing, because that's not a half full word, by the way, that's half empty. And anything that's around overpromise and is around stars and around extraordinary and all these things, you have to wire this in that it's not a sacrifice to do what I'm committing to do. And if you can't figure that out, then there's a bigger set of equations. Again, much like Bill's question, this is a common question and it's a great question. People get trapped in things, and if it's a means to an end, then we know how to wire the means to the end. That's when the stars, if that's the end, because I'm providing this extraordinary college experience for my kids, or I'm building a base in my bank account so that in 5 years from now, when I get to my real passion, well, then you get to be passionate about what yesterday might have been a self-sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice anymore. It's a joy. Do parents sacrifice for their kids? Yeah, I get that. Again, this is a real science. You have days when your kids, you want to rip their arms off and beat them to death. They drive you crazy. But in the final analysis, for most parents, it's not a sacrifice, it's a joy. It's a joy to work late and to give more to your kids. It's a joy to be a leader. It's so meaningful as a leader when someone comes up to you and says, Michelle, you changed my life by how you showed up at work. Now, if you're worried about overpromise because it's a self-sacrifice, again, I'm not saying overpromise at stupid levels. I would never attach overpromise to stupid. I would overpromise attached to passion and joy. Then that makes it a little bit different equation. It doesn't mean every day is perfect. Doesn't mean every day is rainbow and sunshine. Again, it's a real world. I have bad days. But all it takes, and I keep a file in my email, and this will give you some little clues and insights about me. In my Outlook, right under my inbox, because it's alphabetical, is a little file that says, I am amazing. And in that folder, when someone writes me and says, Bill, thank you. Bill, this made a difference. Bill, 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 Bill. If you have this file, Michelle, that says, Michelle, I am a leader, it's not sacrifice at those levels. Don't do it stupidly. Do it passionately. And begin to think and focus and feel what begins to happen. Great question. What else, Sir Brian?
That's it.
Again, I began with a great thank you and feelings of great gratitude that you're here. Thank you so much for your time. I know this is time away from your personal life. For many of you, you don't work this late at night. You're doing this on your own time. I hope this created some value. Write me, use me, maximize me. This is my passion, my joy, and I love to overpromise and overdeliver to you. Have a great night. Have a great tomorrow. and let me know how it goes for you. Everybody, I'm signing off. Take care.